Ji-hoon Park was bored. He sat in the back row of the large lecture hall and tried not to fall asleep. The seats around him were filled with students from dozens of different planets. Some had scales. Some had fur. Some had too many eyes. But all of them were here for the same class, Galactic Ecology with Professor Ilwin. The Galactic Unity Academy floated in space like a small city made of glass and metal. Students came here from 47 different species to learn together and build friendships across the stars. Ji-hoon was one of only 12 humans at the academy. Earth had joined the Galactic Union just 5 years ago, and humans were still new to everything. His roommate Taiho sat next to him, playing a game on his communicator under the desk. Taiho was from Seoul and had never left the city before coming to space. Ji-hoon was different. He grew up in a small village in the mountains of Korea, where his grandparents had a farm. The two of them were very different, but they had become good friends. Professor Ilwin walked to the front of the room. He was a Calassian, a species that looked like a tall, thin bird with silver feathers and large golden eyes. His voice was soft but carried easily across the room. "Today we begin a new unit," the professor said. "We will study apex predators from different homeworlds." A wave of nervous whispers moved through the students. Ji-hoon noticed that many of them looked uncomfortable. The girl sitting next to him, a Raloni named Vela, was already shaking. Raloni were a peaceful species that looked like deer with large purple eyes. They had no predators on their homeworld and were easily frightened. "Do not worry," Professor Ilwin said gently. "We will only look at images and recordings. You are completely safe here." He touched a panel, and a holographic screen appeared in the air. The first image showed a creature from a planet called Darren-4. It was a slow-moving thing with many legs and sharp teeth. To Ji-hoon, it looked like a large caterpillar. Several students gasped. One of them, a small creature covered in blue fur, hid under his desk. Ji-hoon looked at Taiho. Taiho looked back at him. They both shrugged. "This is the Theron crawler," the professor explained. "It moves at approximately 2 meters per hour and hunts by wading under the sand. It is responsible for 11 deaths in the last century." 11 deaths in 100 years? Ji-hoon thought about the car accidents that happened every day on Earth. This creature did not seem very dangerous to him. The professor continued showing different predators. There was a plant that could grab small animals with its vines. There was a fish with poison in its skin. There was an insect that could spit acid. Each one made the alien students more and more afraid. Vela was trembling so badly that Ji-hoon felt sorry for her. He wanted to tell her that these creatures were not so scary, but he did not want to be rude. A large student named Boro sat in the front row. He was a Thaxan, a species with thick armor-like skin and 4 strong arms. Thaxans were known for being brave warriors. But even Boro looked nervous as he watched the screen. "Now," Professor Ilwin said, and his voice became very serious, "we will examine specimens from a world that many of you have heard about. A world that the Galactic Union has classified as a Class 4 death world." The room became completely silent. Every student knew what that meant. Only the most dangerous planets received that classification. Worlds with extreme weather, toxic air, or deadly creatures everywhere. We will now look at predators from Earth. Every alien in the room turned to look at Ji-hoon and Taiho. Their eyes were wide with fear and curiosity. Ji-hoon felt his face grow warm. He did not like being the center of attention. "Earth," the professor continued, "is home to more apex predators than any other inhabited world in our database. The humans have survived alongside these creatures for thousands of years. Scientists are still trying to understand how this is possible." Taiho leaned close to Ji-hoon and whispered, "Why are they looking at us like that? We're not scary." Ji-hoon shrugged again. He had heard that aliens thought Earth was dangerous, but he never really understood why. To him, Earth was just home. The professor touched the panel again. I must warn all students. The following images and sounds may be disturbing. If anyone needs to leave, please do so now. There is no shame in protecting your mental health. Nobody moved. They were too curious. Even the frightened ones wanted to see what kind of monsters lived on the human homeworld. Vela grabbed Ji-hoon's arm without thinking. Her grip was surprisingly strong for such a delicate creature. Is it true? She asked quietly. Is your world really so dangerous? Ji-hoon thought about his grandmother's farm. He thought about the chickens and the vegetable garden. He thought about the mountain behind the house where he used to play as a child. It did not feel dangerous to him. It's just home, he said simply. It's not so bad. Vela did not look convinced. Professor Ilwin dimmed the lights. The holographic screen flickered and changed. A dark forest appeared, filled with shadows and moonlight. Let us begin, the professor said, with the sounds of Earth's predators. Ji-hoon settled back in his seat. He expected to be bored again. After all, he had grown up hearing these sounds his whole life. What could possibly be scary about them? He had no idea that the next few minutes would change everything. Not just for him, but for humanity's place in the entire galaxy. The first sound began to play. The first sound that came from the speakers was a long, sad howl. It rose up and down like a song in the darkness. To Ji-hoon, it was beautiful in a strange way. He had heard wolves howling near his grandfather's farm many times, especially in winter, but the aliens did not think it was beautiful. Screams filled the lecture hall. Students jumped from their seats. Vela covered her ears and made a high-pitched crying sound. Boro, the big armored Daxon, pressed himself against the wall like he was trying to disappear into it. Professor Ilwin raised his hands to calm everyone. Please, please. It is only a recording. You are safe. But nobody was listening. The wolf howl continued, and so did the panicked Taeho looked around with wide eyes. What is happening? It's just a wolf. I don't think they have wolves, Jae-hoon whispered back. The howl ended, and slowly the students began to calm down. Some were crying. Others were holding each other. The small blue-furred creature from earlier had completely passed out and was being carried to the medical corner by two classmates. That, Professor Owen said, trying to keep his voice steady, was the call of an earth wolf. They hunt in packs of up to 30 individuals and can run for hours without stopping. Hours? Someone whispered in horror. Ji-hoon frowned. That was not exactly true. Wolves did not usually run for hours. But he decided not to correct the professor. We will now hear another predator, the professor said. The next sound was a deep, powerful roar. It shook the speakers and seemed to fill the entire room. A bear. Ji-hoon recognized it immediately. There were bears in the mountains near his home. Though they usually stayed away from people. This time, the reaction was even worse. Several students ran for the doors. Emergency lights began flashing as someone triggered a distress signal. Vela fainted completely, falling against Ji-hoon's shoulder. He caught her gently and laid her back in her seat. Should we do something? Taeho asked. Like what? I don't know. Tell them it's okay? Ji-hoon shook his head. He did not think the aliens would believe them. The professor played more sounds. There was the laughing cry of hyenas. There was the hissing rattle of a snake. There was the deep grunt of a wild pig. Each sound made the students more and more terrified. By now, half the class had left the room, and the other half looked like they wanted to follow. Only the two humans sat calmly in their seats. Finally, Professor Ilwin held up his hand for silence. The room was much emptier now, but those who remained watched with fearful eyes. The final recording, the professor said slowly, is perhaps the most disturbing of all. This is the hunting call of one of Earth's most successful ambush predators. It moves in complete silence. It can jump 9 meters in a single leap, and it has been known to attack creatures much larger than itself. The room was completely quiet. Even the air seemed to stop moving. The professor touched the panel. A sound came from the speakers that made everyone freeze. It was a scream, high and sharp, almost like a woman crying in pain. It rose and fell in a terrible pattern, echoing through the hall like the voice of a ghost. Students who had been brave enough to stay now ran for the exits. Boro fell off his chair and crawled toward the door on all 4 of his arms. Someone was praying in a language Ji-hoon did not understand, but Ji-hoon just sat there. He tilted his head and listened carefully. The sound was familiar. Very familiar. Then he chuckled. It was a small laugh, quiet and soft. But in the silent, terrified room, it was like a thunderclap. Everyone stopped and stared at him. Even Professor Ilwin's golden eyes went wide. "I apologize," Ji-hoon said, waving his hand. "I did not mean to be rude." "You laughed," the professor said slowly. "You heard the apex predator and you laughed." Ji-hoon nodded. "Yes, but only because I know that sound. That's just a cougar. We call them mountain lions, too. They live all over the place back home." The silence that followed was unlike anything Ji-hoon had ever experienced. Every alien in the room was staring at him like he had grown a second head. "Just a cougar?" Boro repeated from the floor. "Yes, they're not so dangerous if you know what to do. My grandmother saw them sometimes near her farm. She would shout at them and wave her arms, and they would run away." "Run away?" Professor Ilwin's voice was barely a whisper. "The apex predator runs away from your grandmother?" Taiho nodded, trying to help. "Cougars are actually pretty scared of humans. They usually avoid us. We are bigger and louder than they like. The predators are scared of humans?" Someone said. Ji-hoon shrugged. "Most of them are, yes. Bears, wolves, big cats. They all try to stay away from people. We've been dealing with them for thousands of years. They learned to be careful around us." The room erupted into chaos. But this time, it was not fear. It was confusion, disbelief, and something else that Ji-hoon could not identify. Professor Ilwin stood very still for a long moment. Then he turned off the holographic screen and looked directly at the 2 humans. "I think," he said slowly, "we need to have a much longer conversation about your species." Ji-hoon looked at Taiho. Taiho looked back at him. Neither of them understood why everyone was making such a big deal about a cougar, but they were about to find out. The next morning, Ji-hoon and Taiho were called to the xenobiology department. They walked through long, wide hallways until they reached a large meeting room. Inside, 6 alien scientists sat behind a curved table. They had datapads ready and expressions that mixed fear with deep curiosity. Professor Ilwin was there too, standing quietly in the corner. "Please sit down," said the lead scientist. She was a tall creature with gray skin and 3 eyes arranged in a triangle on her face. Her voice was calm but serious. "We have many questions." Ji-hoon and Taiho sat in the chairs provided. The chairs were too big for them, clearly designed for larger species. Ji-hoon's feet did not touch the floor. "Yesterday," the scientist continued, "you heard the call of an apex predator. You laughed. We need to understand why." Ji-hoon took a breath. "I laughed because I was surprised. I did not expect to hear a cougar sound in class. It reminded me of home." "Home," another scientist repeated. He was covered in green scales and had no visible nose. "You mean Earth, the death world? Is that what you call it?" Taiho asked. "We just call it Earth, or home." The scientists looked at each other. The gray-skinned leader made a note on her datapad. "Let us start from the beginning. she said. The creature called a cougar. How often did you encounter it? Ji-hoon thought about this. I saw them maybe 5 or 6 times when I was growing up. Mostly at night. They stay away from villages during the day. And you survived these encounters? Yes, they never attacked me. I would make noise and look big, and they would leave. Make noise and look big, the green scientist said slowly. This is your defense against an apex predator? It works most of the time, Ji-hoon said with a small shrug. The scientists were silent for a moment. Then the questions continued. They asked about wolves. They asked about bears. They asked about snakes and spiders and sharks. Each answer seemed to shock them more than the last. You swim in water that contains sharks? One scientist asked, her voice high with disbelief. Sometimes, Tayo said. But shark attacks are very rare. More people die from cows than from sharks. From cows? Yes. Cows are these large animals we keep for milk and meat. They can kick very hard if they get scared. The scientists looked like their minds were breaking. The door opened and Boro walked in. He had asked to join the meeting because he could not stop thinking about what he had heard. The big Thaxan sat down heavily in a corner, his forearms crossed over his chest. I have a question, Boro said. His voice was rough, like rocks grinding together. Your grandmother. She chased away the predator with a broom? Yes, Ji-hoon said, smiling at the memory. She was very brave. She said the cougar was more scared of her than she was of it. How is that possible? Boro demanded. My species has armor. We have claws. We are 3 times your size. And yet we spent our entire history hiding from predators. How can a small old human woman scare an apex predator with a stick? Ji-hoon thought carefully about how to explain. I think it is because we have been fighting predators for a very long time. Thousands and thousands of years. We learned how to deal with them. And they learned about us too. They know that humans are not easy prey. Not easy prey, Professor Ilwin repeated from his corner. Can you explain what you mean? Taiho jumped in to help. Wow, if a cougar attacks a human, there will be consequences. Other humans will come. They will track the cougar. They will protect their families. Predators learn that attacking humans brings more trouble than it is worth. You hunt the hunters, the gray scientist said softly. Sometimes, Ji-hoon admitted. But mostly we try to live together. We respect the predators. They are part of our world. We do not want to destroy them all. You respect them? Boro sounded confused. Why? They are dangerous. Ji-hoon pulled out his communicator and showed them some pictures. The first was a family camping in a forest. This is bear country. Bears live all around this area. But humans camp there anyway. They store their food properly and make noise when they walk, and usually nothing bad happens. The next picture showed tourists in vehicles, watching lions in an open field. This is called a safari. Humans pay money to go look at predators in their natural home, just to see them. Because we think they are beautiful. Beautiful? One scientist whispered. The final picture was of a dog. A big, fluffy dog with a happy face. And this, Ji-hoon said, is a dog. Thousands of years ago, wolves were our enemies. They hunted us, and we hunted them. But then, slowly, we became friends. We worked together. Now wolves live in our homes and sleep in our beds. We call them our best friends. The room was completely silent. You made friends with the wolves, the gray scientist said. Her 3 eyes were very wide. You turned your predators into companions. Yes, Ji-hoon said simply. We are good at making friends. Boro stood up suddenly. His armor made a loud clanking sound. Everyone looked at him. I need to think about this, he said. His voice was strange, like he was seeing the universe in a completely new way. Everything I believed about predators and prey. I need to think." He walked out of the room without another word. The scientists looked at each other. Then they looked at the two young humans sitting in chairs too big for them, with their feet dangling above the floor. "I believe," Professor Ilwin said slowly, "that we have much more to learn from humanity than we thought." Ji-hoon just smiled. He still did not understand why everyone was so impressed. To him, this was all just normal life. But he was beginning to realize that for the rest of the galaxy, nothing about humans was normal at all. News traveled fast on the space station. By the end of the week, everyone at the Galactic Unity Academy had heard about what happened in Professor Ilwin's class. They called it the Cougar incident. And suddenly, Ji-hoon Park became the most famous student at the academy. Everywhere he went, aliens stopped to look at him. Some still seemed afraid, but many were curious. They wanted to know more about the strange creatures from the Death World who laughed at predators and made friends with wolves. At first, Ji-hoon felt uncomfortable with all the attention. He was a quiet person who liked to read books and take walks by himself. But the other students kept coming to him with questions, and he did not want to be rude. One afternoon, he was eating lunch in the cafeteria when a group of students approached his table. There were about 15 of them, all from different species. They stood in a half circle around him, looking nervous but excited. "Is it true," a small pink creature asked, "that humans swim in oceans filled with giant monsters?" Ji-hoon put down his food. "Do you mean whales?" "Whales are not monsters. They are very gentle. They do not eat humans." "What about the sharks?" another student asked. "Sharks can be dangerous," Ji-hoon admitted. "But attacks are rare. Most sharks do not like the taste of humans. If they bite someone, they usually let go and swim away." The students looked at each other with wide eyes. "Your oceans must be terrifying," the pink creature said. Ji-hoon thought about the beach near his aunt's house, where he used to swim every summer. "Actually, the ocean is very peaceful. I miss it sometimes." More questions came. Did humans really climb mountains for fun? Yes. Did they really explore caves filled with bats? Yes. Did they keep snakes as pets? Some people did. Did they eat animals with their bare hands? Well, yes. That was called fried chicken. Each answer seemed to amaze the aliens more. The crowd around Ji-hoon grew larger every day. Soon, the academy asked him to give a proper talk in the main auditorium. Taiho helped him prepare. They spent 3 nights working on what to say. On the day of the talk, the auditorium was completely full. Students sat in every seat and stood along the walls. Even professors came to listen. Ji-hoon stood on the stage and looked at the sea of alien faces. His heart was beating fast, but he took a deep breath and began. "I know you think Earth is a dangerous place," he said. "And maybe it is. We have predators and storms and earthquakes and volcanoes. But that is not the whole story." He showed pictures on the big screen behind him. Pictures of green forests and blue oceans. Pictures of cities filled with lights. Pictures of children playing in parks. "We did not survive because we are the strongest or the fastest," Ji-hoon continued. "Compared to many predators, humans are weak. We have no claws. We have no armor. We cannot run very fast or see very well in the dark." The audience listened in complete silence. "We survived because we learned to work together. When one person is weak, others help them. When danger comes, we face it as a group. That is how we defeated the predators. Not by being stronger than them, but by being together." He clicked to the next picture. It showed his grandmother's farm in the mountains. "My grandmother lived alone after my grandfather died. People told her to move to the city where it was safer. But she refused. She said the mountains were her home. The wolves and the bears and the cougars were her neighbors. She respected them, and they respected her. But how? Someone called out from the audience. It was Borrow. He was sitting in the front row, leaning forward with interest. How do predators respect prey? Because we are not prey, Ji-hoon said gently. Not anymore. We earned our place. Every scar on human history is a lesson we learned. Every challenge made us stronger. The predators tested us, and we passed the test. He paused and looked directly at Borrow. Fear is not a bad thing. It keeps you alive. But being afraid and being helpless are not the same. On Earth, we learned that a long time ago. We feel fear, but we do not let it control us. We face it, and we move forward. The room was very quiet. Then, slowly, Vela stood up from her seat. Her large purple eyes were wet with tears. Can you teach us? She asked. Her voice was small but clear. Can you teach us how to be brave? Ji-hoon smiled at her. You are already brave, he said. You came to this talk even though you were scared. You asked a question in front of hundreds of people. That is courage. Vela sat back down, but she was smiling now. After the talk, Taeho found Ji-hoon backstage. He had a strange look on his face. Did you see how they looked at us? Taeho asked. What do you mean? Before, they were scared of us. Like we were dangerous animals they had to be careful around. But now it is different. Now they look at us like... He searched for the right word. Like they admire us. Ji-hoon nodded slowly. He had noticed it too. Something had changed. The fear was becoming something else. Something better. Outside the auditorium, he could hear students talking excitedly about humans. About Earth. About courage and survival and hope. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Ji-hoon felt like he belonged, and he realized that maybe, just maybe, a simple story about a cougar could change more than he ever imagined. 6 months passed after the cougar incident. The story had spread far beyond the academy walls. News channels across the galaxy played recordings of Ji-hoon's talk. Scientists published papers about human psychology. Philosophers debated what it meant to coexist with predators. The small moment in Professor Ilwin's classroom had become something much bigger. And now, the Galactic Union Council was meeting to discuss humanity's future. Earth had been a probationary member of the Union for 5 years. This meant humans could travel and trade, but they could not vote on important decisions. Many species thought humans were too dangerous and unpredictable to trust fully. They came from a death world, after all. Who knew what they might do? But the council had received a new report from the academy. Professor Ilwin had spent months studying humans, interviewing Ji-hoon and Taeho and the other human students. His findings had surprised everyone. Humans were not dangerous because they were violent. They were remarkable because they adapted. They faced every challenge their harsh world threw at them and found ways to survive. They turned enemies into friends. They built communities that protected the weak. They created art and music and stories to help them through the dark times. The report concluded with a simple statement. Humanity has earned its place among the stars. The council invited Ji-hoon to speak at the hearing. He was just a student, but he had become a symbol of what humans represented. Taeho came with him for support. So did Vela, who had become one of their closest friends. Even Borrow came, though he tried to pretend he was only curious. The council chamber was enormous. Representatives from over 100 species sat in rising rows that circled the central speaking platform. Lights floated in the air like gentle stars. The silence was heavy with importance. Ji-hoon walked to the platform. His legs felt weak, and his mouth was dry. He had never spoken to so many important beings before. But he thought about his grandmother, who had faced cougars with nothing but a broom and courage. If she could do that, he could do this. Thank you for inviting me, he began. His voice echoed in the huge space. I am just a student. I do not speak for all of humanity, but I can tell you what I know. He looked around at the alien faces watching him. Some were friendly. Some were suspicious. Some showed no expression at all. Many of you think Earth is a terrible place. You call it a death world. You think we survived by being violent and aggressive. But that is not the whole truth. He took a breath and continued. Yes, our world is dangerous. We have predators that hunt us, weather that can kill us, and ground that sometimes shakes and swallows whole cities. But we are still here. Not because we destroyed everything that threatened us. We are here because we learned to live with the danger. He clicked the small device in his hand. Images appeared in the air around him. Humans planting trees. Humans building shelters for injured animals. Humans holding hands in the face of disaster. When there is danger, we come together. When someone falls, we help them up. When the night is dark and frightening, we make fire and tell stories until morning comes. That is how we survived. Together. The council members watched in silence. We are not special because we are stronger than our predators, Ji-hoon said. We are special because we never stopped trying. Every failure taught us something. Every fear became a lesson. We learned that the world does not have to be your enemy. Even the scary things can become your neighbors if you give them respect. He thought about his grandmother again and smiled. My grandmother lived in the mountains with wolves and bears nearby. She never hurt them, and they never hurt her. She used to leave food out for the cougar that lived near her farm. She called it the neighbor. She said everything deserves kindness, even the things that frighten you. A soft murmur went through the chamber. This was not what they had expected to hear. I am not asking you to trust humans because we are perfect, Ji-hoon continued. We are not. We have made many mistakes, but we have learned from them. And we will keep learning, keep growing, keep reaching out to make friends across the stars. He lowered his head slightly, a gesture of respect. That is all I have to say. Thank you for listening. He stepped back from the platform. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then one representative began to clap. It was a strange sound, not the same as human clapping, more like a clicking of claws. But it was approval. Another representative joined in. Then another. Soon the whole chamber was filled with the sounds of 100 different species, showing their support in 100 different ways. The vote was unanimous. Humanity's probationary status was lifted. Earth was now a full member of the Galactic Union. Afterward, Ji-hoon walked out of the chamber into a long hallway with windows that showed the stars. Vela caught up with him, her hooves clicking softly on the floor. Your grandmother, she said quietly. The one who fed the predator. Is she still alive? Yes, Ji-hoon said with a warm smile. She's 92 years old and still living on her farm. I would like to meet her someday. If that is okay. She would like that. She always says that strangers are just friends you have not met yet. They walked together in comfortable silence, looking at the endless sea of stars through the windows. Behind them, Boro and Taiho were talking. Boro was asking more questions about Earth, about courage, about facing fear. His voice had lost its rough edge. He sounded like someone who was learning to see the universe in a new way. Ji-hoon listened to them and felt a warmth in his chest. A simple story about a cougar had started all of this. A moment of laughter in a terrified classroom had changed the future of humanity. His grandmother was right, he thought. Kindness was powerful. Understanding was powerful. And sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was reach out to the things that frightened you and offer them your hand. The stars sparkled outside the window, full of mysteries and dangers and wonders. Humanity was ready to meet them all.